Hi guys, welcome back. In today's video, episode 32 or 33 of Q1 FY26 series, we will be talking about quite a few companies जिसका result आया था between 13th and 14th of August. Okay, there are around 5 companies. We'll be talking about Ethos. We will also do a P2P with Timex, then Mrs. Bector Food, and then Thomas Scott, and the last one is SJ Logistic. जिसका भी हम थोड़ा सा comparison करेंगे with respect to the other logistic companies that are there. Okay. So first thing first, let's talk about Ethos. Now, before I go in detail, before talking about any of these companies that are there, all the business models that are there, if you want to understand what exactly Ethos does, what exactly Timex does, and so forth, like इसका धंधा कैसा चलता है, head over to my YouTube channel. There is this business analysis playlist बोल के है. सब companies का आपको वहाँ पे पूरा in detail there are this 30-40 minutes video where I have explained with a PPT कि like धंधा कैसे चलता है इन सब लोगों का, ठीक है. But anyways, the first company we will do is Ethos. Okay. Now Ethos को अगर आप देखते हो ना, see, you will see that the sales that is there, it grew by around 26.2%. Okay. But here is the thing, what and people think like यहाँ पे थोड़ा pace of growth is coming back up. It is becoming because if you look at Ethos was the 30 to 40% का growth engine earlier, right? So people have this hope कि like शायद अभी it is slowly coming back up. But here is the thing, अगर आप Ethos को देखते हो, if you look at the last Q1 that is there, Q1 of FY25, that time its sales grew hardly by 19%. Okay, so there is this thoda sa, you cannot deny that little bit push that is coming from that base effect, जिसके वजह से ये that sales grew by 26-27%. Now along with that, another factor over here, कि like the reason it was able to grow sales by this 27% is because if you remember, इन्होंने in the month of May or June, in that May or June का month में, these people opened the city of watches, आप बोल के एक एक गुरुग्राम में they opened around 8 showrooms. It's basically like a एक 22,000 स्क्वायर फीट का एक एंटायर प्लेस है जहाँ पे देर आर अराउंड 5 इंडिविजुअल शॉप्स है, मतलब एक एक ब्रांड का एक एक शॉप प्लस 2 मल्टी ब्रांडेड आउटलेट, विच मीन्स व्हाट यू गेट अ लॉट ऑफ वॉचेस इन वन शॉप. ओके, सो दे ओपन दिस सिटी ऑफ वॉचेस बोल के एक बड़ा सा स्टोर आउट ऑफ विच देर आर 7 सब स्टोर्स. इसमें और एक 2 स्टोर्स आने वाला है, जिसके वजह से ऑल्सो दैट सेल्स दैट इज देयर बम्प्ड अप अ लिटिल बिट, यू एज यू कैन टेल सेल्स इज अप बाय 27%. But the very disappointing factor over here is, you will see that the operating leverage has been a miss in this quarter, right? And I think it's now a very long time where we don't see a decent amount of operating leverage over here. PAT is down by 16.2%. अगर आप margins देखते हो, margins is even more disappointing, because traditionally Ethos का अगर आप देखते हो, EBITDA margin is maintained between 17 to 18%. But this time, if you see in Q1, EBITDA margins fell to 14. The reason for profitability and margins to go down is two reasons. One, since you're putting up so many, like they put up 8 stores in one quarter, right? They put up even a Messica ka showroom. Now because of this, आपका rental cost is very high, right? Because if you know Ethos is only deals with luxury category watches, and यहाँ पे if you want to sell luxury watches, you have to open it in premium location का rent is high, advances you have to pay, right? All of this is high cost things, इसके वजह से operating leverage गया. The other reason is उनका जो ये Switzerland, these people are buying watches from Switzerland, right? So वो currency का भी difference है, that exchange rate, as you know, now I think it's been more than a year or two, where this volatility exists, right, between INR and CHF ka currency rate. Now both of this together, it literally killed the margins that are there. Okay, so why am I telling, I understand कि like यहाँ पे ये margins that are there, and the it's because of the store opening and ultimately that CHF INR rate. Why I'm telling this is because if you remember, I think a year ago, they India Switzerland signed this FTA deal, and according to that, if you what Ethos mentioned is आगे जाके margins will improve, like every quarter I think some 0.5% से margin improve होगा. And I don't clearly remember the details, but I've definitely done a video on this, but I don't remember the exact nitty gritty details of this deal that and what they mentioned in that call, because it's almost a year ago. But even because of that also, little bit margins going down so much, it becomes a little bit of bummer. Okay, now think about it logically, बात करते हैं यहाँ पे. If you think they will do, they might end up doing somewhere around maybe 70 to 100 crores in terms of PAT this year. Okay, even if you consider that, that is still the 1 year forward PE for Ethos still falls somewhere between 60 to 70 ka PE. 19 to 19, not 25% का growth engine के लिए, you're paying 60 to 70 PE. That I feel is a bit expensive, right now at this valuation, it becomes very very hard for you to get a PE ka re-rating, with this growth rate. On the other hand, at least earlier it used to be only Ethos, abhi Timex pe bhi game mein aa gaya, and Timex is growing so fast, right? If you remember, टाइमिक्स का सेल्स वेंट अप बाय 55%. उनका ऑपरेटिंग लेवरेज भी मिला, उनका पैट वेंट फ्रॉम 2 to 14 करोड़. सो थिंक अबाउट इट, 55% का ग्रोथ इंजन वर्सेस अ 25-26%. टाइमेक्स का सेल्स ग्रोथ इज डबल देन दैट ऑफ ethos. सिमिलरली ethos का यहाँ पे ऑपरेटिंग लेवरेज नहीं है, टाइमेक्स का दमदार ऑपरेटिंग लेवरेज है. Similarly, when in terms of margins, Timex ka margins has improved versus Ethos ka margins has dropped down over here, whatever the reason can be. So you see, right? And if I talk about Timex, if I assume like Timex does somewhere between 60 to 80 crores in terms of PAT this year, even they will also uska 1 year forward P also lies between 35 to around 50 ka range. At the end of the day, you're getting a 55% ka growth engine at like a 35 to 50 ka P 1 year forward P versus let's say Ethos, which is like a 25-26% का growth engine available at 70 to 80 PE. इसका growth Timex का growth rate भी high है, and on top of that all the metrics, growth rate, expansion, profitability, margins, everything is improving. Product mix भी better हो रहा है, and it is at a decent valuation, or I would say lower valuation compared to that of Ethos, right? So obviously अगर आप ये watches का race देखते हो, Timex is a much better bet compared to Ethos. Ethos का भी it becomes very hard at this rate, to get P rating, and also at that same time, to even just sustain the kind of the position it has यहाँ पे. There are a high chances कि like आगे जाके अगर ये इसी तरह से growth rate करता रहेगा, or maybe if they continue to grow less and operating leverage नहीं मिला तो there is a high possibility कि like Ethos का PE का derating भी हो सकता है. So that's where Timex and Ethos. Then the second company that we will be talking about is Bector. But Bector का अगर आप देखते हो ना, the result is not really surprising, right? Because think about it, Bector ने for the last few quarters where they have been doing the con call, first they told they will grow by, when you talk about the guidance, they told कि like अरे we will grow by high double digit, okay? Then they told mid teens, then they told low teens. Last quarter में अगर आप देखते हो, they told कि like we will grow by low teens, and this is something we explained in the portfolio analysis workshop which we did last quarter. So make sure to get more such insights like this, how we cut based on the con call ka narrative that is there, get the portfolio analysis Q1 FY26 workshop. I'm going to put the link in the description box below. But anyways, coming here also they mentioned clearly कि like हम low teens से grow करेंगे, right? But low teens is somewhere what, like probably somewhere between 10 to 12 in that range. But इस बार अगर आप देखते हो ना, sales grew by only 7%, and PAT तो छोड़ ही दो भाई, PAT तो है ही नहीं यहाँ पे, PAT is almost flat, hardly up by 3%, okay? Margins is also 12%. If you look at them, traditionally they've been somewhere between 14 to 16% का EBITDA margins. Now EBITDA margin is at 12%. The reason इतना इसका downfall हो चुका है, like the growth rate that is there, it has come down so badly. मतलब 30, 40, 30, 25, 19, 15, अभी 7% का ग्रोथ कर रहा है. मतलब यू सी राइट कि लाइक कितना इट्स लाइक अ स्लो पॉइजन. इसलिए मैं बोलती हूँ कि लाइक पेस ऑफ ग्रोथ को समझना, इट माइट लुक इजी, बट इट्स नॉट दैट ईदर. बिकॉज क्या होता है ना, जब ये पेस ऑफ ग्रोथ कम होता है, इट्स नॉट दैट कि लाइक एक ही बार 30% से ग्रोथ इंजन से 7% होता है. नो, डू यू सी हाउ इट इज स्लोली वो 7% पे आया, राइट? इट इज लाइक अ स्लो पॉइजन, राइट? दैट इज व्हाट इट इज. Fall in pace of growth is like the slow poison. If you're able to detect it early, now you will cut it off immediately. But when you're not able to, it's like let's say if your arm is like poisoned or something. If you're able to detect that early, you can amputate your arm. Otherwise, क्या होता है, पूरा body में शहर बढ़ जाता है. So similarly over here also with Bector, the reason इनका इतना मतलब terrible condition हुआ है, there are two things. One is the bakery segment उनका, and the other is biscuit segment. Now as you know, bakery segment is doing okay. Bakery segment still grew by 19% even in this quarter. Sorry, not yeah, bakery segment. But the biscuit segment that is there, that is where all the problems are arising. First of all, अगर आप देखते हो biscuit segment, it hardly grew by 3% on a year-on-year basis this quarter versus Q1 of last year. क्यों हुआ ये? Two reasons. One is the export market and domestic market. Export market में, as you know, due to this Trump का tariffs, the entire supply chain is really choked over here. Orders का cancellation हो रहा है. On the other hand, in the domestic market, which is a major market over here, कंज्यूमर का यहाँ पे डिमांड नहीं है फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल, ठीक है? मतलब द डिमांड इज कंप्लीटली म्यूटेड, एंड ऑन टॉप ऑफ दैट यहाँ पे क्या हुआ है, रॉ मटेरियल का इन्फ्लेशन इज एट ऑल टाइम हाई. पाम ऑयल्स, कोको का प्राइसेस, मैदा का प्राइसेस, एवरीथिंग. ओके, नाउ इट इज गेटिंग स्टेबलाइज्ड. इट इज नॉट एज बैड एज इट वाज इन द लास्ट year, but still it is definitely a little bit high than what it used to be in the normal levels. Okay, now यहाँ पे ऑलरेडी आपका रॉ मटेरियल का प्राइस हाई है. नाउ यू हैव टू, इन ऑर्डर टू प्रोटेक्ट योर मार्जिन, एटलीस्ट थोड़ा सा आपको यू हैव टू इंक्रीज द प्राइस. प्राइस हाइक लिया, ऑलरेडी एक म्यूटेड कंज्यूमर डिमांड था, ऑन टॉप ऑफ दैट यू टुक प्राइस हाइक, तो कंज्यूमर डिमांड और भी खराब हो गया बिकॉज ऑफ दिस प्राइस हाइक. ओके, so because of these reasons you'll see that the biscuit segment hardly grew by 3%, and this entire thing overall affected Bector ka pura sales growth. Okay, and even right now I don't think for this entire year at least, although the they have a lot of क्या बोलते हैं उनका couple of capacities are coming up. In महाराष्ट्र में एक कैपेसिटी आ रहा है बेकरी का, in Calcutta में एक कैपेसिटी आ रहा है, and in Bhiwadi in the region of Bihar also एक बिस्किट का कैपेसिटी आ रहा है. Although there are three capacities coming live in this year and in the subsequent year, it is just not good enough for them to kind of sustain that that earlier growth rate that used to have around 30 to 40%. It is just not going to happen, at least at least for this year, or probably even for the next year. So absolutely, like a really, it's kind of sad because I've seen this journey of Bector, how I've also been a part of that journey of Bector, where when it came for IPO, it was a completely like a terrible company, मतलब कुछ नहीं कर रहा था. Then उसका guidance पढ़ने लगा, ROE went up, ROE went from single digit to double digit, and then now we're seeing again another down cycle, because of the demand conditions and the both on the raw material side and the supply side. So absolutely terrible set of numbers from Bector. I mean, this is this I know it is one of the it is still small compared to Britannia and everything, but still absolutely terrible number. मतलब 7% का growth है. Imagine that when the country is also growing at that same rate. Okay, then we have another company which is called as Thomas Scott. Okay, now when you talk about Thomas Scott, Thomas Scott is an apparel company. So they have two divisions. One is B2C and the other one is B2B. The B2C division contributes around 95% and the B2B division contributes 5%. यहाँ पे B2C and B2B में एक ही फर्क है, इसका सब का मैन्युफैक्चरिंग खुद थॉमस स्कॉट करता है. यूजुअली व्हेन यू सी अ लॉट ऑफ कंपनीज दैट आर देयर, राइट, लाइक उसका जो ब्रांड्स है, दे माइट हैव देयर ब्रांड्स, बट उसका कॉन्ट्रैक्ट मैन्युफैक्चरिंग होता है. बट हियर these people do everything from manufacturing to supply to taking care of their own brand. Okay, now although these people work, Thomas Scott works in an apparel industry, it is not an apparel company. Like, it's a disguise of an apparel company, it's wearing a mask of an apparel company, but it is really, if you go to see, it is a tech company. Now why am I telling it is a tech company? Is because in logo का एक special feature है. Okay, what they do is, how do they sell their clothes? Like, इनका clothes का इतना demand क्यों है? Okay, so these people are a direct to consumer brand. इसका ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा आता है from the e-commerce platforms such as Myntra and all of that. Now यहाँ पे इन लोग क्या करते हैं ना, let's say for example you search के लिए cargo pants. Okay, and these people collect their data. They see first of all what is trending, what are the keywords that a consumer searching, what is the kind of brand they're searching, and they pick up on this data that is there from various platforms, and then they try to create. Let's say for example अभी trend चल रहा है cargo pants का, and you see a lot of users are typing cargo pants, they're trying to search for it. Immediately then they will research on the style, it will go into production, it will get launched on the website, on various e-commerce platform, and as a result sales उनका high है. They leverage data in order to get their sales. Usually क्या होता है, एक trend आता है, like you create a product and उसके ऊपर trend बनाते हो in order for that product to be sold. यहाँ पर उल्टा होता है, कि like कुछ चल रहा है, उसको बनाओ, उसको बेचो, like that it is. Okay, इसका business model like I told you थोड़ा हटका है, very nice. Actually the owner that is there, he's he's into this tech and everything, that is why he was able to implement it over here. But anyways, इसका अगर आप देखते हो ना, 95% of the business comes from the B2C. यहाँ पे B2C का मतलब क्या है, अपना खुद का brand है which is called Thomas Scott, which they manufacture the clothes for that, and they sell it on e-commerce platforms such as Myntra, Flipkart, Amazon, and also they have some stores. Okay, like उनका 5 store है, all of them are located in Bangalore only. So this is one part of the B2C business. The other part of B2C businesses, now there are these brands such as Aeropostal, FCUK, 77th Street, which are only listed again by the way in e-commerce platforms. So these people make clothes even for them, एक licensed manufacturer जैसा बात बोल सकते हो. Then they have B2B business, which is 5% of the contribution. Okay, this B2B business is what, आपका Raymond के लिए all these different brands that are there, इनके लिए ये लोग clothes बनाते हैं, basically contract manufacturing आप बोल सकते हो, such as for Raymond, Estory, all of these brand के लिए. But majority of the revenue, 95% of the revenue comes from उनका खुद का brand which is Thomas Scott, and by licensing to the other brands. मतलब अदर ब्रांड्स के लिए लाइसेंस करके क्लोथ्स बनाना, सच एज एरोपोस्टल, मस्ट एंड हार्बर, FCUK, Nautica, and all of these all of these companies that are there. Now if you see over here, the this quarter the result has been fantastic because sales is up by 100%, almost sales double ho chuka hai. And also if you look at it, the biggest change over here is the operating leverage. You see that the PAT is up by 150% year on year. Okay, I think the charge went off in the battery. I'm not really sure, but anyways, if you remember the last the yeah, sorry about that, the mic ka charge got over, but anyways, like I was telling you know, the biggest change over here is that the PAT that is there, right, the PAT grew by 150% on a year on year. Thoda operating leverage isko mila hai. Now why this becomes a big change, as you remember in the last year, I think all the 3 quarters if you see of last year, you will see that the operating leverage was a huge miss. A part of the reason was unka teen, I think, plants were about to come up, one in Solarpur, one in Bangalore, and the other one in Gurgaon something, right? So these 3 plants were supposed to come up, maybe because of this. Now why am I telling maybe is because this company doesn't provide any information other than a result doc, and if they feel like they will put up a PPT over here, you should be very lucky. But again in PPT also utna kuch details nahi rehta hai, theek hai? So that is why I'm telling maybe, because I read this in their annual report in 2023-2024, that year, like in the upcoming year, that is 24-25, which was last year, they are putting up this manufacturing facilities. So I believe because ye log manufacturing facilities dal raha tha, uska sab cost tha, maybe that is why capex intensive tha, maybe that's why they missed out on the operating leverage in all of the 3 quarters. Now think about it, ye jo jab ye 3 quarter mein na ye jo operating leverage nahi mila tha, I remember the stock had literally had gone up earlier, like I think from 200 से 500. At the same time, जब leverage नहीं मिला उनको, पूरा गिर के, I think it again came back from 550 from their level to around somewhere 200, 250 level. So the stock is extremely volatile in that way, like मतलब extremely volatile. There is no liquidity also. एक operating leverage नहीं मिला for 3 quarters, and then it was all hell break loose. So yes, that is one thing to keep in mind. But another thing is कि we do not know if शायद for all the 3 quarters over here if you'll get operating leverage or not. Okay, because यहाँ पे जुलाई में एक incident हुआ था in their Gurgaon plant. There was a fire that broke out. As a result, a part of, I think, wherever that fire broke out, a part of it is still shut down, and they have not resumed operations in that part of the plant. We do not know what is the impact over here. शायद for all what is the impact, kitna sales they will lose because of this plant being shut. Even if it is a part of plant being shut, maybe they will go back to not getting operating leverage in the other 3 quarters also. So that is the thing. ये मुझे एक बहुत बड़ा डर लगता है इस कंपनी से, because कि like although company अच्छा है, founders are very nice, they are very focused and all, but since there is lack of information, there is no clue कि like कि like ठीक है, इस quarter में margins नहीं मिला, leverage नहीं मिला, PAT is not growing, EPS is not growing, कि like क्यों नहीं हुआ? Is it like a 1 quarter thing? Is it something that we're going to see throughout the year? When will it improve? Why is the operating leverage not there? Is it because it is because of capex? Capex कर रहे हो, क्या है? There is no information. So that is the only, I would say, a little bit negative thing over here with this business. Although the numbers are good, there is this ambiguity कि like भाई मतलब क्या हो रहा है, कैसे हो रहा है? There is like a big question mark over here. If anybody knows anything about Thomas Scott, do let me know in the comment section, because I couldn't find anything. There are no recent interviews from the management with any TV channels, nothing. It's just a very only there is one thing, that is result document. Okay, so that's that about Thomas Scott. Good, but a little bit it's better to be cautious with this company than go all hunky dory, I would say. Then the last company that we will do is SJ Logistics. Again, SJ Logistics का अगर आपको business समझना है, please refer to the business analysis playlist video. I've covered this company beautifully. Like, you will have no doubt if you watch my video, I can tell that. But here, if you look at it, this company, as you remember, I'm just going to reshuffle a little bit of memory. If you remember, this company had a target to double the sales growth last year. That is to go from 250 crore to 500 crore, and which they did it, right? If you look at the end of the year, they did it. The company conducted the con call for the first time, I believe, in the last quarter, and when asked about the guidance, they refrained from giving it. And earlier in the private calls, they had mentioned that the guidance would be like 500, 750, 1000 crore subsequently for 25, 26 and the year FY27, right? That is what they had mentioned. And then they recall and they told like, no, we wouldn't give any guidance. Now if you look at it, if you look at the sales hardly grew, not hardly, sales grew by 25%. PAT, if you look at it, PAT also grew. I mean, profit after tax, if you see, it grew by 33%. So decent amount of operating leverage, you can tell. EBITDA margin also improved from 14 to 17. Similarly, PAT margin also improved from 10.7 to 11.3. Overall, good set of numbers, right? When you look at it at a first glance, great, kuch nahi hua hai. On top of that, if you see air cargo, which they recently started in H1, I think in H1 or H2 में इन्होंने start किया था in last year, Q2 या Q3 में they started this air cargo. Even this air cargo division also has done well. Now it contributes just in 6 months, I believe it is contributing 3.27% to the top line. So अगर आप उसको volume का भी transactions देखते हो, everything good, okay. But here is the thing, if you look at SJ Logistics was like a 60-70% का growth engine. अभी ये 24% का growth engine कर रहा है, okay. Another thing is, it is, if you look at Q1 FY26, it has done 125 crore. So maybe shayad, that they might not be in the full year, if you see FY25 versus 26, they might not be able to do that 750 crore that was told earlier. Although you can't take it into, like they never mention it explicitly. So that probably they might, even in the full year, they might end up doing some 30% ka growth only. Now when you compare it in the race, right, it still comes first in the race, because if you remember the logistics videos that we have done and we have done the race, we always placed SJ Logistics in the front because of the kind of growth rate it had compared to Tiger Logistics, compared to AVG, compared to Premier Road Lines, or even for that matter, if you see, if you look at the other traditional logistics companies that are there, Blue Dart and everything, although it's not comparable, it still won the race back then, even today, because even today if you see, Tiger Logistics flat sales growth, AVG Logistics flat sales growth, Premier Road Lines, they guided for a 30-35% kind of sales, but we'll have to see, because that is a company, it's a small cap, it provides only result in H1 and H2 ka end. And even if you look at the other traditional that logistics companies that is there, whether it is Blue Dart, whether it is Delivery, whether it is any other company, you see that SJ Logistics has high growth rate. And when you talk about the difference here in terms of all metrics, the difference is wide and vast, right? Matlab somebody is not at all growing their sales is flat, yahan pe 25% ka kar raha hai. At the same time, there is no operating leverage with all these companies, either they're posting losses or profit is degrowing. Over here operating leverage bhi hai, wahan pe to margins ka naam hi mat do, margin is more maya over there, and here margins are improving. So when you look at it, obviously even in Q1 FY26, you see that SJ Logistics is leading the race, even by a huge margin also, that too, when you compare with other players. But we also have to see two things. Is SJ Logistics able to continue to maintain that pace of growth? And the second thing we see is the race, is it coming first or not? Now when you see the second thing, although it is doing better than its peers, uska khud ka growth rate kam ho chuka hai than what it used to do earlier, right? Earlier it used to do around 60, 80 in that kind of range, and now they're doing 24%, which is a huge aberration over here, right? And kya hota hai, market ko ye pace of growth, the market doesn't like pace of growth kam hota ja raha hai, right, ultimately. And maybe again, like I told you, in this entire year, FY26, they might not be able to do 50% growth year on year. They might probably end with 30 to 40%, right? Which is still a little bit of an aberration, you can tell. And आगे जाके और भी pace of growth कम हो सकता है शायद. And as a result क्या होगा? EPS का growth भी उतना ज़्यादा नहीं होगा. Valuation becomes more and more expensive, and growth rate comes down and down. So ultimately, this company, which was in that high growth, low PE का engine, क्या होता जाएगा? Because that EPS might not grow at that faster rate, it will become that like low growth, high PE engine. It can come into that case that is there. From case 2 से like probably case 4 से ही आ सकता है. So that is the thing with SJ Logistics. Although it has done very good set of numbers compared to its peers, uska khud ka when you compare it to the past performance, when you look at the numbers, it's not that great. You might tell me that H1 is leaner than H2, which I understand in the logistics space, but again giving that 125 crore kiya hai, so it will be very tough for them to reach probably 750 crore in this year, and it will probably be कितना ये कर सकता है, शायद 600 करेगा या 650 it could be, maybe not 750, which would be a 50% growth rate over the 500
500 crores they did in FY25. Okay, so that's that about these companies. Yeah, so that's that about these companies. I'll see you in another video. I'm planning to do the entire jewelry space, all B2B as well as B2C companies. Let us see. I am thinking of doing a P2P and show it with a PPT also. Dekte, because I don't think I've done any update other than the Q1 FY26 ka updates during jewelry sector. I don't think I've spoken about the result that is there. So that's that, guys. I hope you all have a nice day. Take care. Bye.